Gary, Indiana. A small steel town where factory smoke colored the sky gray and dreams felt like luxuries most families couldn't afford. In a cramped house on Jackson Street lived 9 children who would change music forever. But one child stood apart from all the others. His name was Michael Joseph Jackson, and from the moment he could walk, his life belonged to the stage. He was only 5 years old when his father Joe noticed something extraordinary. While his brothers practiced their instruments, little Michael watched from the corner, studying every move, absorbing every note. Then one day, he stood up and sang. The voice that came from that tiny body stopped everyone cold. It wasn't the voice of a child. It carried pain, longing, and a depth that shouldn't exist in someone so young. Joe Jackson saw dollar signs. Michael saw approval, something he would chase for the rest of his life. The Jackson 5 rehearsals weren't playtime. They were brutal. While other children played tag and rode bicycles, Michael spent hours perfecting dance moves until his feet bled. When he made mistakes, punishment followed. Joe believed in discipline through fear. The belt hung on the wall as a constant reminder. Michael learned quickly that love came with conditions. If he performed well, he received praise. If he faltered, he faced consequences. This became the foundation of his understanding of the world. By 1969, the Jackson 5 had signed with Motown Records, and Michael, now 11 years old, became the lead singer who captivated America. Their first single, I Want You Back, shot to number 1. Michael's voice carried the group. His energy lit up television screens. His smile made millions of people feel joy. But behind that smile lived a boy who had never experienced a normal day of childhood. He couldn't go to regular school. He couldn't make friends his own age. He couldn't walk down a street without being mobbed. His education happened in tutors' sessions between concerts. His friendships existed only with adults in the music industry. His playground was a tour bus traveling from city to city. The other children at Motown Studios stared at him with a mixture of awe and confusion. Here was a kid who could command a stage like a seasoned performer, yet he seemed lost when it came to simple childhood games. He didn't understand jokes that other kids found hilarious. He felt awkward during casual conversations. The only language he truly understood was music and performance. That was where he felt safe, where he knew the rules, where he could control the outcome. At night, in anonymous hotel rooms across America, Michael would press his face against the window and watch normal kids his age walking home from school, carrying backpacks, laughing with friends. He watched them enter homes where dinner waited and homework needed finishing. He watched them live the life he would never have. Inside his chest, something began to harden and soften simultaneously. Part of him accepted that he was different, special, chosen for something greater. Another part of him began to grieve for something he could never name because he had never experienced it. That grief would follow him forever, shaping every decision, every relationship, every creative choice he would make. The world saw a child star rising to unprecedented heights. Michael felt like a soldier on a battlefield where the war never ended and surrender meant disappointing everyone who depended on him. So he kept performing, kept smiling, kept giving the world what it demanded, while the child inside him slowly disappeared into a place so deep that even he couldn't find it anymore. At 21, Michael Jackson stood at a crossroads. The Jackson 5 had made him famous, but fame felt like a cage. His father still controlled the group's decisions. His brothers wanted to maintain their established sound. But Michael heard something different in his head, a vision that went beyond anything his family could imagine. He wanted to break free, to become something the world had never seen before. The question was whether he had the courage to step into the unknown alone. The answer came in 1979 with an album called Off the Wall. Working with producer Quincy Jones, Michael poured everything into creating a sound that blended soul, disco, funk, and pop into something entirely new. When Don't Stop Till You Get Enough hit radio stations, it announced the arrival of Michael Jackson, the solo superstar. The album sold 10 million copies and earned Michael his first Grammy. But instead of celebrating, Michael felt disappointed. He believed it should have done better. He believed he should have won more awards. This hunger, this impossibility of satisfaction, would drive him to create his masterpiece. 3 years later, Thriller exploded onto the planet like a cultural atomic bomb. Every song became a hit. The album sold 1 million copies per week at its peak. The music video for Thriller wasn't just a promotional tool, it was a 14-minute cinematic experience that transformed how artists approached visual storytelling. Michael didn't just break records, he shattered them into pieces so small they could never be reassembled. He became the biggest star on earth, bigger than Elvis, bigger than the Beatles, bigger than anyone who had ever existed in popular music. But something strange happened as Michael's fame reached these impossible heights. His appearance began to change. His nose became narrower. His skin grew lighter. His face seemed to transform with each passing year. He claimed vitiligo, a condition that destroys skin pigmentation. He admitted to a few cosmetic surgeries. Yet the changes seemed to accelerate beyond medical explanation. People whispered theories. Was he trying to become white? Was he rejecting his black identity? Was he trying to erase the face his father had given him? Michael insisted the speculation hurt him deeply, yet he continued changing, continued altering, continued transforming into someone unrecognizable from the boy who had sung with his brothers. The truth lived somewhere more complicated than simple explanations could reach. Michael looked in the mirror and saw his father's features staring back, the man who had beaten him, controlled him, and stolen his childhood. Every time he saw that face, he remembered the fear, the pressure, the impossible standards. So he changed it. He also saw himself as an artist creating his own canvas. If he could control his music, his dance, his performances, why couldn't he control his appearance? In his mind, he was sculpting himself into an ideal, a living artwork that transcended race, gender, and human limitation. He wanted to become a symbol, not a person. He wanted to exist beyond the boundaries that confined ordinary people. His compound in California became a place called Neverland Ranch. He named it after the magical island from Peter Pan, where children never grew up. He built amusement park rides, a zoo, a movie theater, and filled the property with children's laughter. He invited sick kids and underprivileged children to visit, to experience joy and wonder. To Michael, Neverland represented the childhood he never had, a place where innocence could exist forever, where responsibilities couldn't intrude, where the adult world stayed outside the gates. His employees watched as the biggest star in the world played on roller coasters and fed giraffes, behaving more like a child than the children who visited. They saw a man who had everything yet possessed nothing that mattered. They saw someone who had conquered the world but lost himself in the process. Michael Jackson had transformed from a child performer into a global phenomenon, but the cost of that transformation was the very humanity he tried so desperately to preserve in his fantasy world. The spotlight that made Michael Jackson a god also burned him alive. By the late 1980s, his fame had reached levels that defied comprehension. He couldn't step outside without causing riots. His image appeared on every magazine cover, every television screen, every conversation about music and culture. People analyzed his every move, every word, every gesture. The pressure to maintain his position at the top of the world became crushing. And pressure, when it builds without release, creates fractures that eventually shatter everything. In 1993, the first accusation arrived like a bomb through his front door. A 13-year-old boy claimed Michael had molested him. The news media descended like vultures on rotting meat. Every television network led with the story. Every newspaper printed headlines that presumed guilt. Michael's face, once associated with magic and joy, became linked with the most horrific crime imaginable. He denied everything. He claimed innocence. He spoke about his love for children being pure, about wanting to help kids who suffered, about creating safe spaces for young people who needed escape from difficult lives. But in the court of public opinion, his strangeness became evidence. His Neverland Ranch became sinister. His friendships with children became suspicious. The world that had worshipped him now questioned whether they had celebrated a monster. The case never went to trial. Michael settled out of court for over $20 million. He claimed the settlement allowed him to move forward, to avoid a circus trial that would destroy everyone involved. His supporters said paying money proved nothing, that wealthy people often settle to avoid media nightmares. His detractors said innocent people don't pay millions to make accusations disappear. The truth became irrelevant because perception had already rendered its verdict. Michael Jackson's reputation sustained damage that would never fully heal. Parents who once celebrated his music now wondered if they should allow their children to listen. Radio stations questioned whether to play his songs. Sponsors dropped endorsement deals. The king of pop had fallen from his throne, and climbing back up seemed impossible. Michael responded the only way he knew how. He poured himself into his work. He released the album History, which contained songs defending himself, expressing his pain, and lashing out at those who had betrayed him. The album's promotional campaign featured giant statues of Michael being floated down European rivers and erected in city centers. Critics called it megalomania. Michael called it art. The truth was that he was a wounded animal trying to appear strong while bleeding internally. Every song became a defense. Every performance became proof of his innocence. Every public appearance became an opportunity to show the world he was still standing. But the damage went deeper than public perception. Michael had always struggled with pain management. Years of intense dancing had destroyed his body. He had burns from a Pepsi commercial accident that never fully healed. He suffered from chronic back pain, joint problems, and insomnia that made sleep impossible. Doctors prescribed painkillers. Michael took them. The pain dulled. The pills became necessary. One prescription led to another. Relief became dependence. Dependence became addiction. He denied it, of course. Famous people always deny their addictions until they can't anymore. He called the medications necessary medical treatment. He surrounded himself with doctors who would give him whatever he wanted. And what he wanted was to escape the pain, both physical and emotional, that had become his constant companion. Friends watched helplessly as Michael spiraled. They saw his weight drop. They noticed his energy fade. They heard his speech slow and slur. They understood he was dying slowly, killed by the very fame that had made him immortal. Some tried intervention. Michael cut them out of his life. Others enabled him because they depended on his money. The machine around Michael Jackson kept running because too many people needed it to keep running. His family needed his income. His employees needed their jobs. The entertainment industry needed his concerts and albums. So everyone pretended everything was fine, even as the evidence of collapse became undeniable. Michael Jackson had become a prisoner of his own legend, trapped in a cycle of pain, medication, performance, and accusation that would define the final chapter of his life. By 2009, Michael Jackson was 50 years old and broke. The man who had earned over $1 billion throughout his career faced financial ruin. Neverland Ranch, his sanctuary, was in foreclosure. He owed hundreds of millions to creditors. His spending had been reckless for decades, maintaining an entourage, buying artwork and antiques, supporting family members, and funding a lifestyle that required millions per month. The money had flowed out faster than it came in, and now the well had run dry. His only option was to return to the stage, the place that had owned him since childhood, the place he both loved and feared. AEG Live, a concert promotion company, offered him a lifeline. They proposed a series of 50 comeback concerts at London's O2 Arena called This Is It. Michael agreed because he had no choice. The concerts would earn him enough to pay his debts and secure his children's future. But there was a problem. Michael's body was destroyed. 5 decades of dancing, performing, and physical abuse had left him a shell of the performer who once defied gravity. His knees barely functioned. His back screamed with every movement. His voice, once powerful and clear, had weakened. And his mind, clouded by years of prescription medication, struggled to focus on the enormous task ahead. Rehearsals began in Los Angeles. Dancers and crew members watched as Michael tried to recapture his magic. Some days, flashes of brilliance appeared. His muscle memory kicked in, and for brief moments, he moved like the Michael Jackson everyone remembered. But those moments grew rarer. He arrived late to rehearsals, sometimes not at all. He appeared disoriented, confused, unable to remember choreography he had invented. His weight dropped to dangerous levels. People could count his ribs through his clothing. His handlers assured everyone this was normal, that Michael always got thin before tours, that he would pull it together when it mattered. But the people who truly knew him understood they were watching something terrible unfold. Michael couldn't sleep. This had been true for years, but the pressure of the comeback concerts made it worse. He would lie awake for days, his mind racing with anxiety about the upcoming performances, about his finances, about his children's future, about proving to the world he was still the greatest. He begged his doctor, Conrad Murray, for help. Murray had been hired as Michael's personal physician for the tour. Michael trusted him completely, believed Murray would take care of him, would give him what he needed to function. And what Michael needed, or thought he needed, was propofol, a powerful anesthetic used in hospitals for surgery. Michael called it his milk because of its white appearance. He believed it was the only thing that allowed him to sleep. On June 24, 2009, Michael rehearsed at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. Video footage from that night shows him performing, dancing, singing, looking almost like himself again. He seemed excited about the concerts. He told his team they were going to create something historic. He went home to his rented mansion in Holmby Hills believing he had turned a corner, that maybe he could pull off this impossible comeback after all. That night, he asked Dr. Murray for his medicine, for the milk that would let him sleep. Murray administered the propofol through an 4-drip. He had done this many nights before. Michael drifted off into unconscious darkness, his breathing shallow, his heart rate slowing. Murray left the room to make phone calls. When Murray returned, Michael Jackson wasn't breathing. Panic erupted. Murray tried CPR. He called for help. Paramedics arrived and found Michael's body already growing cold. They rushed him to UCLA Medical Center, but everyone knew. The greatest entertainer in human history was gone. At 2:26 p.m. on June 25, 2009, doctors pronounced Michael Joseph Jackson dead at age 50. The cause was acute propofol intoxication. The manner was ruled homicide because Dr. Murray had administered the drug in a home setting without proper monitoring equipment. The child who had entertained the world, who had brought joy to billions, who had changed music forever, had died alone in a bedroom, killed by the desperate search for peace that had eluded him his entire life. The news spread across the globe in minutes. Michael Jackson is dead. 3 words that seemed impossible. Internet servers crashed from the traffic. Television networks abandoned regular programming. Radio stations played his music in tribute. People who had criticized him, mocked him, and questioned him suddenly remembered only his genius. The controversy faded, at least temporarily, replaced by collective grief for the loss of someone who had been part of the cultural landscape for 40 years. Outside the hospital where he died, fans gathered by the thousands, crying, singing his songs, holding vigils that would continue for days. The funeral became a global event. Nearly 1 billion people worldwide watched the memorial service at the Staples Center. His daughter Paris, just 11 years old, spoke through tears about losing her father, calling him the best daddy anyone could imagine. Her words broke hearts everywhere because they revealed the truth everyone had forgotten. Michael Jackson wasn't just an entertainer, a accused criminal, or a tabloid curiosity. He was a father, a son, a brother, a human being who loved and was loved. His brothers carried his golden casket, their faces twisted with grief. Stevie Wonder sang, Mariah Carey performed, and speakers from Berry Gordy to Brooke Shields shared memories of a man they had known beyond the headlines. In death, Michael achieved something that had eluded him in life, peace from judgment. The world began to reassess his legacy. Yes, the accusations existed. Yes, his behavior had been strange. Yes, his appearance had changed dramatically. But none of that could diminish what he had accomplished. He had broken racial barriers at a time when MTV refused to play black artists. His video for Thriller forced the network to change its policy and open doors for every black artist who followed. He had popularized the music video as an art form. He had invented dance moves that every performer since has copied. He had sold over 400 million albums, raised hundreds of millions for charity, and brought joy to generations of fans across every country, culture, and language. The trial of Dr. Conrad Murray came 2 years later. Prosecutors argued he had shown gross negligence by administering propofol in a home setting and then leaving Michael unattended. Murray claimed he was only trying to help Michael sleep, that Michael's addiction had made him desperate, that he had begged for the medication. The jury found Murray guilty of involuntary manslaughter. He served less than 2 years in prison. Many felt the sentence was inadequate for a man whose actions had killed the most famous person on the planet. Others understood that Murray was just the final enabler in a long line of people who had failed to save Michael from himself. The real culprit was fame itself, the machine that had consumed Michael since he was 5 years old and never released its grip until his heart stopped beating. Michael's children grew up in the aftermath of his death. Prince, Paris, and Blanket faced the challenge of building lives in the shadow of their father's overwhelming legacy. They inherited his wealth, estimated at over $1 billion from ongoing music sales and royalties. They also inherited his pain, the burden of being Michael Jackson's children in a world that would never let them forget who their father was. Paris struggled publicly with mental health issues, attempting suicide multiple times before finding stability. Prince pursued education and charity work, trying to honor his father's humanitarian legacy. Blanket, renamed Biography, stayed almost entirely out of public view, protecting himself from the scrutiny that had destroyed his father. Today, more than 15 years after his death, Michael Jackson remains everywhere. His music plays constantly on radio stations, in movies, at sporting events, in commercials. New generations discover his artistry and fall in love with his genius. Controversies continue to emerge, documentaries make new accusations, and defenders passionately argue his innocence. The debate will likely never end because Michael Jackson himself never resolved into something simple. He was both victim and possibly victimizer, both genius and troubled soul, both generous humanitarian and isolated eccentric. He gave everything to his audience and kept nothing for himself. He sacrificed his childhood, his appearance, his privacy, his health, and ultimately his life on the altar of entertainment. The child who could never grow up became a legend who will never die, forever frozen at that impossible intersection of human fragility and superhuman achievement. His story serves as both inspiration and warning, about the cost of fame, the loss of innocence, and what happens when the whole world wants something from you but nobody stops to ask what you need for yourself.